Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this quarter's E.D.G.E.R. Today, we are honored to be hear from two wonderful ladies here. Senator E.D.G.E.R is here, and of course, everyone knows Mayor Mary. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it over. Are your mics working?
Yes.
Okay. We also have this live streaming, so when we open it up to Q&A, maybe just raise your hand and I'll come around with a microphone for you. And just as a reminder, there's coffee and tea in the Keurig behind you, and please eat some donuts. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, ladies.
Okay, I'll just start, because I'm sure you'll have more questions for the senator. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for coming. I'm going to start by introducing Monona's new city administrator, Neil Stick-Schulte. We're very excited to finally have an administrator after 15 months. So Neil's been on board for about three weeks or so, and you just want to say a couple words, Neil?
Sure. Yep, I think so. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. It is a pleasure to be here in the city of Monona. I've spent my last 2.5 years in the city of Green Bay, Go Pack Go, which was great, but I never did move from my house in Sun Prairie. So I commuted during the week, and just kind of always felt that there wasn't quite the same opportunity up there that there was down here in Dane County. And my wife was working for CUNA Mutual at the time, and then now we're actually working for Exact Sciences, and we just kind of keep seeing our ties increasing here in Dane County, not getting less. So it's good to be back. It's very exciting to be working in a community that has as much, certainly challenges, but as much opportunity as there really is going on right now. So looking forward to working on the San Damiano project, which we've jumped in with both feet on that one, as well as our public safety building, working on that project, are the two really top big ones. Of course, it is also budget season, so we're getting ready to jump in for that one as well. So no, certainly not going to be bored anytime soon. I want to thank the mayor and certainly the council for having their trust in me to kind of do this job, and looking forward to meeting all of you personally and hopefully working with you very soon in the future. So
thanks, Neil. I'm just going to give a few general updates about the city, and then I've got some commercial updates, development updates to give as well. So first, San Damiano has been something we've been working on for a couple of years now. Monona bought the San Damiano property on the north end of Monona Drive. I can't even remember. The dates all run together. We either closed 2 or 3 years ago. I appointed a steering committee that's been working on a master plan, and the plan, we hope it's completed by the end of December. We hired MSA to help us with the plan, and have had some public listening sessions and focus groups. Based on all that, they developed 3 conceptual plans with a lot of features that overlap. So at our July meeting, after getting a lot of input from the public, the committee made some decisions on a lot of the features that they would like to include, kind of pick and choose from several of the plans. We're continuing to evaluate proposals for a facility. We know we need some kind of an event facility there. Not sure yet if it's going to mean renovation of the existing house or a new building. There's a lot to consider on either side. We're also getting going on a public safety building, civic building update, which is something Monona desperately needs. This has been in process for the last 5 years, really the last, I guess, 12 years actually. But when I became mayor, I appointed an ad hoc facilities committee 5 years ago. And we're at the point now, we issued an RFP for architectural design services in June. Those proposals were due on the 21st of July. I have also appointed a building committee, and we actually met yesterday to evaluate. We got 10 proposals. Evaluate those. We've decided on 4 that we'd like to bring in, 4 firms that we'd like to bring in for in-person interviews, and that'll be helping sometime in the next few weeks. Once we get, it's kind of difficult in August to get a date that works for everybody. So then fun stuff. Monona Police Department's annual night out is next Tuesday night, so come on down to Winnequa Park at 5:30, and it overlaps a little bit later in the evening with our senior center's final concert for the season, which is also at the park, and there'll be food trucks and a dunk tank and med flight and all all kinds of fun things. So, and I understand that kids get a free hot dog and drink if they come with their parents. So, and one other thing, we do have a short-term rental ordinance that the council approved in the spring. Staff has been working on finalizing a lot of the paperwork and process for that. And last I heard, we're hoping that those materials are live on the city website in early August, and there's a 6-month period in which existing short-term rental owners, this is for VRBO and that type of thing, have to come up to compliance with the ordinance. In terms of development, we're still working on the Bloom project, which is the corner of Dean and Monona Drive. That has been taken over by Compass Properties. They've made some revisions to the original plan, and that has now been approved with some conditions by the Plan Commission. They're hoping to return to the Plan Commission in August with their what's called their precise implementation plan, which is the more detailed plan for the development. And right now the plans call for 99 market rate rentals units in one building along Monona Drive. BMO Harris Bank is still going to be the anchor, and there's also plans for a cafe co-working space at Springhaven and Monona Drive. Our other big project is the North Point Whitehorse development, which is right off the corner of Stoughton Road and Broadway, where the junkyard used to be, for those of you who were here years ago. That's going to be a 75-unit development. Includes 63 apartments and 12 townhome units. The majority of those are workforce units with varying income requirements. CDA is currently negotiating the development agreements, and last I heard, we're having a special CDA meeting, we think next Tuesday, where the Community Development Authority will approve those, and then they'll go to council there. They would like to get to break ground by the end of August. So, Besa, which is a development where Monona Garden used to be, kitty corner from the current project down on Broadway and Bridge Road. Their project was approved several months ago, and they're planning to break ground by the end of August as well. So we're happy to see some of these things finally coming to fruition. We've got a couple of businesses moving into Southtown. Hobby Lobby, you might know, has been vacant for a couple of years now. Five Below and Michael's are each going to take a third of that, and my understanding is there's a third tenant whose name isn't public yet, I guess, for the third spot. And then the Shopko building, there's a Floor and Decor took up the bulk of that, but there's going to be an application for a new tenant for the remainder of that coming to Plan Commission sometime this month. So hopefully those buildings will be full. Madison Pediatric Dental bought the Rutabaga building. Excuse me. They're currently in the brown brick office building right behind the new Chipotle. They bought Rutabaga, they've torn it down, and they're building a completely new building there, and they've broken ground for that. And that's apparently on quite an aggressive construction timeline, so I'm not sure exactly when it's planned to be done. But and then the Old National Bank site, which is next to Chipotle, Plan Commission has approved a 2-tenant building right next to Chipotle, and one of those, they do have a tenant for one spot, which is going to be an AT&T store, and we're still, the other spot is still available if anybody knows of anyone. So that's all of my city news. If anyone has any questions, if not, I'll turn it over to Senator E.D.G.E.R. Update us on what's happening at the Capitol.
Mary's always so organized with her presentation, and here I sit with no papers in front of me.
You still have memory.
We're working on it. It's a challenge on some days. So the state legislature, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be able to share space with you all today. In the Capitol right now is actually historically a pretty quiet time. After the budget gets done up until September, there are no session days, which are the days where the full legislature gets together and debates bills. Typically, there are committee meetings that continue to occur. So there are some committees that are meeting. Many of the meetings are informational at this point. There are a few bills being introduced, but things really do slow down in the summer after the budget process. The budget this year was a unique process. I've been in the Capitol for think this may be my sixth budget that I've been on, and what we saw was the majority party taking pieces of the budget out and introducing them as standalone pieces of legislation. So we saw that with the shared revenue legislation, which certainly benefited communities like Monona, and I was honored to be able to vote and support that piece of legislation. There was standalone legislation that affected school funding for specific programs, but then certain parts of the budget continued to stay in the budget. So it was very hard to navigate the budget this year with certain policies coming forward and other ones falling off the tracks. One of the pieces of legislation that fell off the tracks was the Brewers Stadium investment for as we move forward. I don't think that that is dead. I think there's a hope that we can continue to cross the finish line, especially with $4 billion of revenue continuing to sit in the state's coffers. If there's a way for us to keep the Brewers here, they are an economic stimulus for the state. But figuring out how to do that so it's not on the backs of ordinary people is important. So that is an example where typically that would be in the state budget, but now we're waiting to continue that conversation. A lot of people are asking me, so what's next? With the exciting day yesterday in the Capitol building, the investiture of Judge Janet to Justice Protasiewicz joining the Supreme Court, very much anticipate that Law Forward's case in regards to whether or not people in Wisconsin have adequate representation due to the way our maps are drawn will be filed at some point really soon. I've heard it may even be today. It's going to be interesting to see what their legal arguments are. I think there's a hope that the Supreme Court will take that case up very quickly and that it will wrap up at some point in the spring. So in fact, the legislature, the Senate, and the Assembly would be running on those new maps in 2024. So with the presidential election, Senator Baldwin being on the ballot, and the potential of the legislature all being up depending on whether or not that case moves through the Supreme Court at a swift speed, 2024 is likely to be a very interesting time here in Wisconsin for people who are watching politics. And because of that, I'm not sure what it is that's going to actually get done in the Capitol building for the rest of this year. People are a little spooked, especially in the majority party right now, because of the real potential for change. And, you know, I think that it's vitally important that those of us that serve in the legislature continue to be available to our constituents, hearing what matters most to you all, and beating that drum through this whole process. We in our office have outgoing listening sessions the first Friday of every month. We have one coming up this Friday because it's the first Friday of the month. And it's going to be at Finca Coffee on Rimrack Road between 9 and 10. And we do a bit of outreach into the direct community that is closest to that. We move around throughout the Senate district, but also invite anyone, whether they're in my district or in other districts, to join us. As the leader of my caucus, I think it's important for anyone to feel welcome to come into those conversations. We have e-newsletter that we send out every other week through our office. I think many of you in this room are receiving that newsletter. If you would like to receive it and aren't receiving it, if you send an email to my office, and Mandy is here with me, she'll pass out my business cards, and you can just send an email to the office in the subject line, say subscribe, and we'll add you to that email newsletter list. Let me think. I think, frankly, the biggest thing to hit Wisconsin is the new Supreme Court, and that was a pretty exciting day yesterday to be in the Capitol building and be part of that investiture. So hopefully, in 18 months, I don't feel like Charlie Brown with Lucy holding the football and having it pulled out from under my feet yet again, which is something that I have felt for many years in the Capitol building representing the good people. But again, I am thrilled to be here in Monona and always appreciate being able to hear directly from members of the community, business owners, families, friends, and people who care about what matters most to them. And if you're not able to make any of the listening sessions, the coffee hours, I also appreciate invitations to visit businesses. So if there are new businesses in the community or existing businesses, we look forward to those invitations. We often highlight those tours on Saturdays. We have Small Business Saturday posts on our social media. And like to lift up especially the small family-owned businesses within our community. So, any questions? Yeah.
Can you, it's kind of a question for both of you, but can you talk about the repeal of the personal property tax and kind of how that affects? So the appeal of the personal property tax and how that affects funds to local governments.
My understanding is that it was done in a way that is supposed to make the local governments whole, because it was part of the budget process. But that's my impression.
That's my understanding too, and I think it was tied into the number that is given to us for part of the shared revenue number that Monona's going to be getting, which is about $260,000, which is makes a huge difference for us. I don't think we've never gotten more than about $100,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but it's like one police officer, and maybe with about $10,000 remaining. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's covered, which is good because the personal property tax has been problematic to collect over the years. It's just difficult to keep records on it, and some businesses paid it, and I'm not even sure exactly who besides businesses. It was just businesses who paid it, but others didn't, and typically small amounts that you were spending a lot more money than it was worth to try to collect, and so this will be, I think, a good thing overall for everyone.
It's been, from my whole time in the legislature, there's been people of all sorts of political flavors that have been saying, we need to do something about this. So I think one of the big concerns historically has been, how do we make our local governments whole if we do this repeal? And I believe that was taken care of through the shared revenue project.
And I actually just read the other day, I never really thought much about the origin of that actually started out before there was income tax, and it was a way of funding local governments by taxing people for their businesses, at least for the property that they owned as part of their business. And it's just kind of this anachronism that has hung out there for a long time. So it's good to have it gone.
Thank you for the question.
And Monona really appreciates what's happening in terms of shared revenue. It's going to make a huge difference for us this year and ongoing. The fact that there's going to be an ongoing potential for increased shared revenue every year, since it's going to be tied to the sales tax, and if that increases, then it's not going to be huge amounts of money every year, but it's going to certainly help to at least have something there. So we're going to be able to give our employees hopefully some decent pay raises this year, which we haven't in a long time, because right now everything is tied to the amount of new construction that we had the year or two before, and how much that increased the value of the property. And when you're landlocked like Monona, you don't have a lot of new construction every year. So there's some years where last year, and I don't mean to be complaining, but we had a total of $95,000 to spend to increase our operating budget that had to cover salaries for 75 full-time people, health insurance increases, all that doesn't go very far. So year after year, that's tough. So yeah, it's been a good thing.
Yeah, and that was a drumbeat we heard from across the state. So hopefully most people are celebrating that.
Yeah, and Monona's a lot better off than a lot of communities, especially up north, who have nothing going on. So, any other questions, anyone? Bevan?
Yeah. As kind of a follow-up on that, so is there, with the changeover of the court, the majority on that, is there any hope of the dark store loophole ever being resolved, and then that being an additional source of revenue for local towns?
So I do not serve on the courts. I can't anticipate what cases they will take up and how they will rule. I do know that that is not something that is unique, again, to Monona. That is something that folks all across Wisconsin, from red districts and blue districts and purple districts, are waving flags about. I think folks have hung their hats on the hopes that the courts will clear that up as opposed to the legislature, but I would also argue that there's a real potential that if there's a change in the makeup of the legislature, that things like that, in addition to much bigger items like healthcare, gun violence, healthcare for
Daycare.
women and trans folks, and daycare and cannabis legalization, things that pull environmental protections, things that pull upwards of 80%, regardless of party affiliation, will actually be able to get done with a more thoughtful and pragmatic, balanced legislature. So not only are we hanging our hats on the new court, but also the potential of actually getting things done that matter most to the families and people of Wisconsin.
And there was a court case recently decided that in favor of, I can't remember which community it was, maybe you remember.
I can't remember, but yeah, it definitely finally one in favor of the municipality.
Right. Over the last few years, there have been a couple cases where, I don't know if municipalities and their attorneys have changed the way they've approached dark store lawsuits, but where the courts have been more amenable to listening to their argument. And the Supreme Court actually made a decision a few months ago on one lawsuit that I know we think, well, we have a current one again from Walmart. They sued us a couple of years ago, and now there's been one hanging out there for a year and a half or 2 years. And we're anticipating that eventually they may withdraw that suit because of this decision. So I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it would be good to have a legislative change so you actually have something on the books to go by. But we'll take it if there's a good outcome of some court cases too. So, because it's an ongoing issue. Every year we have some of our big box stores suing the city, and of course, when their taxes are then cut, it's not that we're over at Walmart all the time, so it's not like we don't spend money from city operations, working over there. But when their taxes are cut, the money has to come from somewhere, so the burden falls more on the residents. So it needs to be. It would be nice to have a legislative solution. Anyone else?
Thank you much, everyone.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you again, ladies, for coming today and for informing us of all the wonderful changes. I'm excited to see what the rest of the year brings. And just a couple updates. Tomorrow night, business after 4, Bob is hosting over at Starion, so swing by. They have quite the offering for us. Alice Cooper tickets. Yeah. Funny story, that was actually my very first concert. I was probably like in 3rd and 4th grade with my dad, so he needed a buddy and I was it. So yeah, I know, right? And then later on this month, the last Thursday, I believe it's the 31st, we have another Lunch and Learn. It's going to be with a gentleman from E.D.G.E.R. So if anyone is looking for some mentoring, come on down and meet up with Kenneth. So thank you all for coming.